Hey everybody, Kelly Anne Blount here, author of I Hate You Fuller James, and today I will be interviewing the amazing Rob Shapiro, author of the Book of Sam. So Rob, I know from Wattpad, he is a novelist, a TV writer. He recently wrote for the animated series DNAs, and he has a half an hour sitcom in development. And the Book of Sam is his YA debut, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Major fan of your world. So let's just start with a question that has really been bugging me and I really wanted to ask you. So the Book of Sam follows the journey of an unlikely hero who will stop at nothing to save his best friend. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about Sam and how he finds himself in hell?
Yeah, so the story begins with Sam. He's living kind of this nondescript life in Toronto where he feels he's kind of lost in the shuffle. He's in a family of overachievers and he doesn't get along well with his parents and he doesn't have friends in school and he's bullied. And the only solace he has is that he works at his uncle's kind of this rare artifacts and hobby shop called Cloaked Atlas. And he's got one friend since childhood named Harper. So the story kind of begins with Sam discovering that, or acknowledging at least, that Harper is about to leave on an academic exchange, and he sees it as he has one opportunity to confess his love and to actually, finally find the courage to tell her how he feels. So he sets up this elaborate plan to do so, but in the process, he ends up opening a portal to hell, and she gets kidnapped, and he decides that he has to go after her to save his only friend.
Gosh, I love it. I love it. I love an unlikely hero, and Sam fit the bill to a T.
Yeah, that was kind of the point of it, is that, just kind of getting away from the whole chosen one idea and just telling a story about a character that was a little more run-of-the-mill and unexceptional and just like a little more relatable.
He's definitely relatable. I love when I'm reading young adult books. It's always great to read about, the jock and the football star, but it's also great to read about the nerd or, a kid who experiences bullying, because stuff like that is so prevalent today that this just made it more real as I was reading it. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. So the Book of Sam features several characters who were based on or are demons living in hell. So tell us what kind of research you did before, as you were writing the book, and did you learn anything that you weren't expecting?
So it's funny, whenever I write, I honestly do very little research on anything because I always just consider myself a fiction writer. So even when I'm writing about something that might take place in anything that's remotely real, obviously in this case it's not, it's fantasy, but whenever it's anything real, I still want it to be through the lens of like fiction, how I see it. So in this case, I did some research at the beginning just to get a sense of like hell and different interpretations, how different cultures have treated it and told the stories. And so there were little things that I picked out. So some of the types of demons, I don't know if like species is the right word, but like some of the types exist. But then I changed it pretty much how I wanted to change it, just like to fit the story or what I thought would be like more entertaining or better, more interesting. So I remember like Solace, for instance, one of the characters. I came across a name. It was a type of demon, and but I think it was like a little tiny owl demon, or a demon that looked like an owl. And I was like, I like that name. I kind of liked its backstory, so I took it. And I mean, even she's not a demon, but the character Hollinshead, I couldn't figure out a name for her, so I Googled like cool women in history, clicked on page 6 of Google, and just came across her name. So I don't know if it's research necessarily, but that's kind of just how I go about it in a very like surface manner. And whatever I learn along the way, I always try to use in the story in some capacity.
Very cool. Now, without giving any spoilers, will there be a sequel, and or what can readers look forward to reading next from you?
So I hope there's a sequel. My idea was it was always going to be at least 2 books, if not 3. Like my wildest dreams, it's 3, because for me, I have so many ideas for like what I can do in the world and with the characters, and obviously not spoiling how it would end. There is at least some places it can go.
Mm-hmm.
So in the last little bit, I've been starting to like at least plot out a sequel, but it's in rough notes to the point like I don't even know what it is yet. So I absolutely hope it will be, but have I written anything concrete? No. I started working on another YA novel, but that's also in such early stages that I wouldn't even know what to say about it. So for me, it's kind of just focusing more on TV and film these days, and just enjoying Book of Sam being out there and people reading it and connecting with young readers.
Very cool. Now, as writers, we love to talk about writing. So I thought I'd ask you some questions about
Yeah.
process and inspiration and Wattpad. So
Mm-hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about your journey becoming an author and also writing for TV?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I always feel like my journey started like very young. I was always a writer, and I know that's like such like a broad thing to say, but I just was. I mean, my mom actually like a few months ago gave me a book I wrote in like grade two. And it's like a pretty basic story of a detective and stuff, but like in grade two, I was like, actually, I read it and I was like, this is really well structured. Like there's definitely like something here when I was in grade two that was like, I kind of got it. But my journey was, I got published a few times over the years, but I always wanted to be a novelist and a TV writer and, write movies as well. But, I had some like things along the way, but it was really in around, I want to say maybe like 2013, 2014, where I just went in a different direction. It was actually like at the advice of my wife, because she could tell like I just wasn't happy with my writing. So I went and took a really cool writing class in Toronto and I joined Wattpad. And for about 6 months, maybe even longer, I just read stories. I mean, if you remember, I feel like you were in Wattpad very early. When you first go in, it's just you don't even know where to like find stories. It's a whole different platform now, but back then I was just like I couldn't believe people had like just all these writers. It was crazy,
Yeah.
actually. And you were one of the first writers I discovered on there.
Huh.
And funnily enough, here we are in 2020,
Right.
and this was I like 6, 7 years ago, maybe longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then after that, I wanted to write a story. So I wrote another YA novel, which I promised myself I'd go back to. But while I was letting that sit, I decided to write this other story, which was at the time called Harper's in Hell and now became Book of Sam. But the idea was I just loved a certain type of story growing up, which was in the 80s and 90s. It was a type of adventure story. Um, and it was everything. I don't know. The best way to describe it is just like this Amblin Entertainment, Steven Spielberg style, where it was everything from Goonies, which he produced, to other things nothing to do with him, like Bill and Ted's and Labyrinth and Neverending Story. And I was reading so much YA at the time and I loved it, but it just wasn't, it felt so very different. It just felt
Mm-hmm.
like a teenager versus like an oppressive government, which I always really enjoyed. It just felt like there was like this gap. There was just sort of a story missing, and I felt it was the story that I grew up loving. So that's why I decided to create Sam Sullinger, who's kind of the unchosen one, and set him off in this adventure in a new world and take all the things I loved from those stories. And that was in 2015. I published it to Wattpad. It was chosen as a feature story, did really well. And for 2 years, I went out there pitching it, and in last year, and got an offer from a great publisher in Canada named Dundurn Press, and the rest is history, as they say.
Love it. I love that so many authors, like we were talking about just a little bit before this interview, we feel so connected. And a lot of times it just started as simply as like finding someone online. And,
Yeah, totally.
the writing world is a great place. And I strongly urge anyone watching this, if you have a favorite author, reach out to them. We'd love
Totally.
to hear it.
Great advice.
You want to tell Rob about how much you love his book? Please do that because it's amazing. We love it.
Yeah, and I think that like Wattpad's a great place for that, and it's just a great place. Like if you do have a story, I mean, not to say every online community you always have to be a bit careful, and not everyone you meet in anywhere is always gonna be great, but it is actually a really supportive community, and it was a great place. Some people gave really helpful notes, some people were just encouraging, and some people were just enjoyed your work. So it's really it takes courage to put something out there in Wattpad, and I'm sure there's other platforms too, but it's a nice place to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And Wattpad has played a really big role in both of our lives. And you told us a little bit how, you started and got on there. If readers do want to check out your work on Wattpad, what is your Wattpad username so they can find you?
I believe it's Rob Shapiro. I think it's at Rob Shapiro. You can find it, or you can search the Book of Sam, because I took down the story, but there's the first chapters up there, so you can check that out, and then just a few little things I wrote over the years.
Very cool. Very cool. And Wattpad is a primarily free platform where you can read. There are some paid stories, but the majority, millions and millions of stories are free. So go on there and check out some writing for free.
Absolutely.
So this is a question that I always love asking people when I interview them. The question is, and I'll explain it as well, when writing, are you a pantser or a plotter? And for those of you who aren't familiar with those terms, pantser means essentially like writing by the seat of your pants, just sitting down in front of your laptop or computer and just going. Or are you a plotter? Are you making outlines and saying, ooh, like, we need to have the inciting incident be this chapter, boom, boom, boom. Which are you, and why are you that way, should I say?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am definitely a pantser. I start every project being like, I am going to plot this thing out so intricately that by the time I get down to writing, it's going to take me no time. I'll know everything that happens. Never works out that way. I think one of the biggest lies I tell myself is that I am just like how much I put into an outline. And when I do outline something, halfway through writing, I don't even check it anymore, because I find that once I'm in there, it just takes on this life of its own. I've already made decisions that have deviated from the outline, which has rendered it to be completely useless. And I just go with it. And I know, I also believe like my first drafts are terrible. Like they're bad, but I have to get it out there. And I know that I can then take it and make it into something usable, or that I can pitch, or just something that, I'm proud of. But I have to get through the first draft. So I often like the first draft of the Book of Sam that I put on Wattpad, I just wrote a placeholder ending because I really had no idea how to end it. I had a vague idea of what I wanted, but I didn't know how to get there. But I'm like, I just have to finish, and then I'll come back to it in a month, let it sit. And it's crazy that the ideas I have are like, they just come out of nowhere. Like there's no outline that could capture it, because, I'll get it while I'm driving, halfway through my second draft, and then I have to go back and change the whole thing. So I'm a pantser. I think it is my personality, but I also feel like it's completely out of my hands, because if I did more plotting beforehand, it just wouldn't work out either way. So now I just like embrace the chaos. I jump in and figure it out as I go.
Embrace the chaos. I feel like that should be a hashtag that needs a
Yeah, no kidding, eh? Yeah.
Especially for 2020.
Yeah, I hear you.
So what drew you talked to us a little bit about this, but what drew you to writing young adult books as well as TV and film and animated? What drew you to all these different realms and genres of writing?
Yeah, for me, there are so many things that I love genre-wise, and there's so many genres that I do want to write. I've always loved young adult. I'm in my 30s now, and I still read it. I still love it. I still get excited by what like the hot new YA release is, and I'm always checking like, here's the the bestsellers, and I'm always trying to find those books. I've just always loved it. There's something about the writing. So many of the authors, like just growing up, and whether it was, something like The Giver, for instance, or Tolkien, there was just so much. And I know YA has changed over the years and over the generations, but there's just something about I love, and I always wanted to do it. And Book of Sam was really just like my chance to like give it a go. And truthfully, honestly, I think it was about maybe halfway through the first draft where I was like, I think this is actually my voice. Like I felt this is the first time like I didn't really feel like as much of an imposter as when I write other things. And like when you're young, or you're starting out, or you're emerging writer, or you're even just doing it as a hobby, like I feel like you kind of like fight your nature for some reason. I was like I was veering dark in my writing, but then I was like, what? Why am I doing this? This is weird. I'm like not that dark of a guy. So I started like just kind of like listening to it more. And I think the Book of Sam, because it was based on things that I just hold so dear, it was easier for me to just kind of like slip into my natural voice and just let it go. And then with kids animation, I mean, it really came down to always loving animation, from film and TV. And then I just thought in Canada, the US absolutely, but in Canada was producing really great shows. So when I started getting interested in it, and I started realizing that this is content that I really like, that I think is really great for kids, useful either as entertainment or, you know, in some cases has a bit more to say. But when I started writing it, I just loved it. It's just so much fun to write. And it, you know, if an animation script, say, I don't know, 13 to 15 pages around there, like telling a clear story in that compared to like in 70,000 words or 100,000 words, in some cases, like we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
it's really a different skill, but it has its own set of equal challenges. So that's what I always like, that, like just the ability to tell a story. Like if you can do it in one image on a painting or a meme these days, or if you can do it in a huge 3-volume book or in a 14-page script. I mean, it's just that ability to tell a story just makes you a better writer.
Nice. And I really enjoy your voice while reading, and your descriptions just allow me to feel like I am in the scene with the characters. And I'm wondering, do you think, you're welcome, do you think that, you know, your background of working in TV film, working in animation, working as a writer, have all of those come together to, you know, shape your voice? You said you just, you know, you felt like you found it when you were writing the Book of Sam. Do you think all those experiences have shaped your voice? Do you think you might be different if you were strictly a novelist?
I do. I think writing television, because it's such a different style, and not just like in terms of like formatting a script versus formatting a manuscript, but the
Right.
style of storytelling, like writing prose in a novel compared to like action in a script. Writing like television, it's almost like in television, you always have to be mindful of every character has to be cast. Whereas a novel, you can go crazy. I mean, whether
Right.
it's a graphic novel, a picture book, I mean, you're not constrained by anything besides what's the best way to tell a story. So you learn to be economical, but you also learn to like let your creativity go a bit more. So I think that it's influenced me a lot. I mean, I also think there's these other things too, where no matter what you're writing, when you get to a certain point, you're going to have to take notes. Whether it's a story editor, an editor, a showrunner, you're going to get notes. And it is that ability to actually like take the note, like, you know, be okay with it, you know, accept that, you know, it's probably a good note, and then be able to actually do it. And I think developing those skills both for television, film, and for prose writing, writing a manuscript, a novel, it's really helpful. And it's the ability to understand what people are trying to tell you, how they're trying to make your work better, and how these one little change, how you have to make like these subsequent changes, and how it just kind of makes the work better in general. So it's like each has influenced the other a lot for me.
Cool. Really cool. Now, here's a question that I get asked a lot. Do you have any advice for writers who are just getting started in their career, or perhaps who have written a manuscript and they aren't sure what to do next?
Yeah, so if you're getting started, the best advice I could give is finish your work. Like, I can't even tell you how bad my first drafts are. If, like, when I look at my second draft, third draft, when I'm actually out there pitching or trying to sell or sells, you know, luckily, if anything does, it's so different, but it is really that process, and you have to just be willing to go through it. And I think the biggest thing I found with myself compared to some other writers or other writers who I really admire who've had a lot of great success is they finish. Like they just have all these things that maybe they don't all find success, which maybe they will in the future, but each time, just that process of going from beginning to end in the story, it just makes you a better writer. So for me, it's just remember, it's a craft. It's something you work on, just like music, you know, or any other discipline. Keep working at it and finish, like no matter what. If you have a finished manuscript, what I can tell you is, I mean, it does happen. People sell novels every day. I think the real work comes after you've written the novel, when you actually have to go out there. I mean, I can tell you, like, my novel was rejected many, many times, well over 100 by agents in Canada and the US until it had a publisher interested. And that was probably over the course of a year and a half, 2 years. So these things tend to self-eliminate because they're, it's hard. It's hard to deal with rejection, and you always feel kind of hopeless about it. But the truth is, like, it does happen. It takes a lot of rejections to get to the point where you want to be. So you just have to see it through. And if you have a manuscript, you've kind of gone through and the responses and what you want it to be, which happened to me as well, it's okay to go back to the drawing table, rewrite it, figure out if there's something that's wrong with it or that you think that can improve it, and start the process again. I mean, as well, like, it's a long road. Every time it's a long road, no matter what.
Absolutely. And just because you're revising something doesn't mean that the first draft wasn't worthy, because that is what got you to the second draft.
Totally.
So it's really important to be persistent. And, like you said, rejection happens. I don't know if a single person in our profession who's not had a rejection, including gigantic authors. People like Stephen King, they have faced rejection. So you just kind of have to think, I feel like, you know what, this wasn't the book for this person, for this editor, or whomever the agent, it wasn't a good fit, and therefore I'm going to keep on going and find the right fit.
Yeah, that's it. So much of it is timing too. Like, when you take something out, it is about finding that right person who just believes in it enough that they want to represent it or acquire it, or they just like you enough that they'll open the door for the next project you have to bring them. But it's this process of patience and persistence that eventually gets you there. It's luck. It's the luck of timing by sticking it out long enough. It's the best way I could put it.
Right. Don't give up and keep trying.
There you go.
That's good advice for anything in life.
I agree.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of concludes our interview today. Remember, the Book of Sam is available anywhere books are sold. Please consider ordering from your local or indie bookstore, and remember to leave a review, because reviews are incredibly helpful for authors. And the Book of Sam is a perfect book for students, YA book clubs, or anyone else interested in YA fantasy. And yeah, I just can't recommend this book highly enough. It's been my pleasure to interview you. It's so great to meet, I say face to face, but screen to screen, I guess you could say. And I look forward to what's coming from you next.